That Pro designation that Apple did years ago really translated to iPhone for photographers. That was the or videographers was the other thing. That Pro model was just, we're going to give you all the tools that you need to have interchangeable lenses, bigger sensors, everything that you would need as a photographer to kind of take those professional level images. So we could do long exposures with it. We can do light streaks with it. We can capture landscapes at night. We can do light painting and capture the Milky Way. We can capture people at night with night mode as well. We can even do star trails and light trails and all that fun stuff. Cameras and settings. This is where, versus a DSLR and mirrorless, it gets a lot easier, right? Because really when it comes down to it, we've got our lens selections made for us. So we've got down at the bottom of your phone, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons that are going to be down on the bottom. And it's going to say 0.5, 1x, 2x, 3x, or 5x, or something along those lines. And you can see, like, you're going to have that look at the bottom. You're going to see at the bottom of the screen that you're going to have those numbers. Now, for most of these Pro models, what we have is we have an array of 3 lenses on the back and 1 lens on the front. You have that front camera. Then we have a ultra wide angle. That's going to be that 0.5x. This is usually what we're using when we want, like, star trails, where I showed you the wide star trail. And then I went to the same, almost the same shot, almost the same location, just at a tighter. So one's doing a wide angle, one's doing the tighter angle, right? And the difference being that the focal length and then also that aperture, right? That aperture value that we have. Now, that's one thing to note about the phones, is that we're going to have a fixed aperture. That's why, again, getting the most recent models, because as they get better, that aperture number gets better, right? That's one of the things that they tout every year. And then we come down to how does that translate to us who are photographers. We're going to look at it in 35 millimeter equivalents, right? So when you see somebody shooting, like we have an instructor on Kelby One, Rami, who does a lot of ultra wide angle shots. He does a lot of ultra wide angle landscapes. He's going to be using that ultra wide angle, and you can see right on there on that chart, 13 millimeters, right? That's going to be kind of that shot. You're going to have that ultra wide angle, 13 millimeters. Then we're going to have a main camera. This tends to be like the best camera on your phone. It has the best aperture, the biggest sensor, all that. And that sits in that like 24 to 26. It varies by model. And actually, the newer ones allow you to select your millimeter that you want that native camera to be in, from like all the way to 35 as well. The key with that one is that's going to be your sweet spot for night. If you can fit your composition in that main 1x, you're going to get the best results. So that's what I want you to remember out of this. The main camera is going to give you your best results. The ultra wide angle camera is going to give you a different viewpoint, but you're going to get less performance because of that, because it not being as wide of an aperture and the sensor not being as powerful. Same thing goes for that telephoto. When you go to the telephoto range lens, you're going to have that same kind of drop off that you had going from the ultra wide, or going from the main camera to the ultra wide angle. Still, they all can do it. It's still good. I just want everybody to remember as we're going into this, I tend to start out with, how do I get this composition in that 1x? And if I can't, then I'm moving to the other ones. When I move to the other ones, I just have to have compromises. And that's like anything in photography. You know, we always have to give and take. So again, what about the aperture? We talked about, like, that's one of the things that's different with shooting with a phone, is it's a fixed aperture. And people will go, well, you know, that must not be good because it must have a shallow depth of field. It really doesn't, because the sensors are so small. Having that wide open fixed aperture really doesn't matter. Everything's pretty much in focus. That's why those new modes of like portrait mode are very, very powerful, because they allow us to mimic a larger sensor with that bokeh and that blur we get in the background. So we just don't have to worry about aperture settings on the phone. That's kind of great. We just don't have to worry about it. So the small sensor means that more things are in focus, even at that wider aperture. Anything that you change on the aperture is simulated. Like when you take a night mode or a portrait mode, where you're taking a portrait, and then afterwards, there'll be a little f-stop number that's there, and you can control it. That's all computational. It's all fake after the fact done. But it's still really good. If you look at like where we've come to where we are, the ability for us to like see that depth of field or that aperture through the phone is incredible. It's almost like getting like a free lens upgrade, where we just like, we have that standard landscape lens, sharp, wide, everything's in focus, and then we can just hit that button, go into portrait, or in this case, night portrait mode, and we get immediately an upgrade to like an f2.8 lens. You know, so we didn't even have to go invest into that expensive gear. So what about shutter speed? This is an interesting one too, because if you come from a DSLR mirrorless, you're used to having a shutter speed that you can control from like 1/8,000th of a second all the way up to like 30 seconds or beyond with bulb mode. On an iPhone, we're really maxed at 1 second. We can go from about an electronic shutter of like 67,000th of a second all the way to 1 second. Anything longer than 1 second is simulated. Again, not a problem, because I'll show you, you've seen those shots that I've shown you. When we start to simulate it, we have to use things like the night mode, which I'll show in a second, or other apps that will simulate it. But we just don't have to worry about that much because of that computational photography. It just kind of does it for you and figures it out. And then ISO. Again, this is one where it ranges all the way up. We do need a third-party app to adjust ISO because the main camera will just use ISO. It just automatically adjusts and go, I'm going to auto ISO it. And what it's going to do is it's going to, for night shots, it's going to start raising that ISO, which us as photographers, we get very nervous and we're like, oh my gosh, don't raise my ISO. I want to shoot at 100. I want to shoot at the base ISO. But what's going to happen there is, say I'm taking a 20 or 30 second exposure. It's going to take they're just going to take a bunch of shots at a very high ISO, but then it's going to stack these shots together, average out the noise, the same way we could do in a DSLR mirrorless if we wanted to. We could take 100 shots over a sequence, stack them inside. You can go into Photoshop, you can go under mathematics and averaging and average those together and remove the noise. The difference is your camera does that for you, so we don't have to worry about it. So it's really nice. And then what about exposure? Well, that's what's great about, again, with shooting with an iPhone, is that you just set the exposure by clicking on it and dragging up and down. And then if you want to lock it, you long tap, and that's going to lock and hold that exposure. So if you want something brighter, you drag up. You want something darker, you drag down. And that's it. We can, again, lock that exposure, and that AEAF lock will show up. So how do we set up this night mode? What's great is it will automatically turn on if you haven't disabled it, but you have to make sure that it's active. That little icon up there, if you tap it and it turns to this yellow, that means night mode is on. And what that's telling me is I'm going to right now, that's going to take that shot, and it's going to be a 3-second exposure using night mode. That's it. That's all we need to. I mean, I could end the class right there because that really is how easy it is to use night mode. But there's little nuances about it that we'll go into and kind of explore. But that's really what I want to drive home. All the shots that you saw were using that concept of we are just composing the scene, lighting the scene, moving around the lights, or working with the available light in order to expose during a longer period of time and get the shots you've seen. So there's a little bit more to it. Like I said, what we want to be able to do is once you activate it, you can actually turn that time up and down. Now the max you can go on the standard app that I'm showing, like this is the out-of-the-box app that you're getting with your phone, the max you can go is 30 seconds. So we're not going to be able to go any longer than that. If you want to click this arrow to go into that night mode, that arrow that goes up, when that happens, you're going to have the night mode icon on the bottom. When you select that night mode on the bottom, it's going to have a slider that goes right into the left, and it's going to come up and tell you auto at first. So what auto means is I am making the decision. It's automatic, right? It will not go above a few seconds unless it's on the tripod, and it has to automatically to detect that it's on a tripod. So if I have my phone here and I put it on a tripod, it's not moving, and I'm telling you, like if you do not have it on a tripod, it will not detect that, and people get frustrated and like I can't make a longer exposure. Okay. It's not on a tripod, or it's not on a stable enough tripod where it's picking it up. But once it picks it up, it's going to allow you to push that. And then if we turn it all the way to the left, it'll just turn it off. I don't know why you do that, but the only reason I show you that is because sometimes people will drag and they'll go down. They'll be like, well, my pictures are always dark, and you got to look at that thing. And if you go all the way over to the left, it'll just turn it off. And then middle is the automatic setting. And then if you go all the way to the max, that's going to be things like the Milky Way, where you're going to want to max it out 30 seconds. It's going to do all the magic for you and give you the shot. And then all you do is click the shutter and wait 30 seconds. The picture does all the Photoshop magic inside of the camera. So that's what you get. You get the results. You take a 30-second night mode picture. This is, again, right off the coast of light-polluted Florida, and that's how easy it is.
If you love photography and you have an iPhone, then join us this March at the iPhone Photography Conference. sign up at KelbyOneLive.com.